That boy is our last hope.
No. There is another.
That's right, guys. There is another. What am I talking about? Another struggling public company has decided it's going to start buying Bitcoin for its treasury. And that company is GameStop. To no surprise, anybody that's on Bitcoin Twitter, that's been the big news. We've just been seeing one post after another, everybody cheering because GameStop has $5 billion in cash sitting there, the melting ice cube. They need to spend it on something. So, hey, let's buy some Bitcoin. For the people that aren't familiar with GameStop, GameStop has very loyal shareholders, and Ryan Cohen, who is the CEO of GameStop, has been able to cultivate this kind of cult-like following. Some people even believing that he's attempting to turn GameStop into the next Berkshire Hathaway. How is he going to do that? You might be wondering. GameStop has diluted their shareholders and reined in expenses at the same time and have amassed, as I said before, about $5 billion. So the question is, how much of that are they going to put into Bitcoin? Number two, is this really just a stunt to continue providing attention for GameStop? Because as you guys will see when we break down their financial picture, they're actually struggling, right? Their business isn't actually growing. And finally, is all of this hype deserved? Without further ado, let's take a high-level snapshot here of GameStop's financial picture. So 2024, the revenue was $4.33 billion. Now that does sound amazing, but just in terms of context, keep in mind that's a 24% decline year over year. GameStop has been working on reducing their expenses. In Q1 of 2024, their expenses were about $290 million to $300 million compared to in 2023, their expenses were $345.7 million. The cost of the revenue in 2024 was $3.164 billion, leaving them a gross profit of $1.17 billion, which obviously could be making you think, yay, that's amazing. They earned $1 billion that they could actually spend, right? That would indicate that they have profit. However, the operating expense was $1.2 billion. So that actually, unfortunately, ended up resulting in a slight operating loss. So they are not actually cash flow positive from operations. And as you guys know about my take on MSTR, that is one of my biggest fears with public companies. It's fine and dandy that people are excited about companies buying Bitcoin. The only thing is that a company that doesn't actually produce earnings, right, that limits their potential. So the big takeaway for the operating costs from GameStop is that their revenue alone doesn't actually cover their operating costs. So they are actually operating at a loss, even though they've been able to shore up about $5 billion that currently they aren't touching. In all fairness, they have had some profitability in some quarters. The only problem is that it hasn't really been consistent. And as I said, they've got over $4.6 billion in cash. And let's face it, Ryan Cohen and his management team could do something with this. And of course, Bitcoiners are thinking and hoping that he's going to buy Bitcoin. And according to the announcement that we had yesterday, yes, indeed, he has committed to adding Bitcoin to their treasury. So GameStop's ability to generate revenue from operations is actually under pressure, right? As I just explained, they actually operated at a loss in terms of their operating income. So essentially, what that means is that the money they bring in does not cover what is needed for daily operations in that business. So GameStop's best bet is to figure out alternate streams of revenue. Now, of course, one of those streams of revenue that's being considered is adding Bitcoin to its treasury. But as most of us know, or I don't know how many people want to deny it or not, but essentially the only way to turn that Bitcoin into revenue without selling it is to dilute your shareholders. So I would assume that beyond GameStop being able to add new revenue streams to their business that doesn't involve diluting shareholders, I unfortunately believe that is right now the only way that he can infuse money into the business is by diluting shareholders. So the summary for GameStop is this, right? Even though they've got the $5 billion, their revenue from operations is not currently sufficient to sustain the business without leaning into its cash reserves. So while GameStop has a huge runway with all of its cash reserves, it still needs to figure out how to transform its business model into something more successful that actually generates revenue, positive revenue from operations. Pleb Underground is brought to you by NOHhue. Go check them out at NOHhue.com. They are building the Amazon for Bitcoiners, a one-stop shop for Bitcoin-only brands. New brands are going to be added every month, so go check them out. Don't miss what's happening at NOHhue.com. Pleb Underground is brought to you by CypherSafe. You guys all know I am a pet rock enjoyer, love the swag, love the collectibles. This is the ultimate Bitcoin collectible. That's right, guys. We're talking 16 ounces of solid titanium, the Bitcoin Rouleau Triangle. Go check it out at CypherSafe.io. Now, I wanted to talk about this business of Ryan Cohen essentially claiming to turn GameStop into a Berkshire Hathaway. Now, look, that is very nice to hear, right? If you are in traditional markets and you are buying equities, a CEO saying that he wants to model his business around Berkshire Hathaway is like, I've just made it. This guy is serious. He's low time preference, and we're going to get loaded, right? We all going to make it. But the reality is this. There have been several CEOs throughout history that have touted that they wanted to convert their business into a type of Berkshire Hathaway, or to attempt to lead investors into believing that their business would eventually become a Berkshire Hathaway type of business. And essentially Berkshire Hathaway, without going into the long history, right? Originally that it was a failing textile company, which Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger successfully turned around and turned it into a massive investment vehicle, which today, I mean, the average investor dreams of having Berkshire Hathaway stock. But this took a lot of time, and they did a lot of moves that people really didn't like. And what Berkshire Hathaway was doing was boring. Okay. It's still, by many people's measure, very boring. My point is that other companies, other CEOs along the way have said the same thing. One of them that I often like to use as an example is Eddy Lampbert, who was the CEO of Sears. Okay, Jim Cramer was touting Eddy and how amazing he was, and how he thinks just like Warren, and they're going to convert Sears into a massive holding company, just like Berkshire Hathaway, and the shares at the time were trading for $180. I mean, obviously these shares went to absolutely nothing. If you unfortunately listened to Cramer and bought into Eddy Lampert's bullshit, you're sitting on like minus 99% loss, if not minus 100% loss, because you can't trade Sears shares. So hopefully you sold out before then. But my point is this, right? Essentially what ended up happening was there was a big turnaround story for Sears. So investors started to Eddy Lampbert was able to get various lines of credit, okay, in order to try to bolster Sears sales, right? Try to give Sears a new look, new ads, all this stuff. None of it ended up working, okay? And all that ended up happening was Eddy Lampbert was just simply dumping his shares and diluting the Sears shareholders. And on top of that, right? He was actually leaning on private equity to provide funding as well, which of course did not have favorable terms. So Sears was strapped with some terribly negotiated debt. Eddy Lampert, who just gave a really good, I should say Jim Cramer, who gave a really good story about Eddy Lampert, and the rest is history. Sears became absolute garbage, and all you see today are those, the rundown, the rundown non-existent signs on closed shopping malls. Now, of course, I'm not saying that GameStop ultimately goes the way of Sears. That's just insane nonsense. But what I am saying is this, right? And it is the same thing that goes for any business that is going to use Bitcoin as a treasury. It's fantastic that you don't want your ice cube to melt. I don't want my ice cube to melt either. That's why I save in Bitcoin as well. But the truth of the matter is that if your business does not turn around and produce profits from operations, okay, and free cash flow, then guess what? You don't have enough revenue to sustain your business without creating debt, okay? And that debt will have to be paid. The idea that you do not have to pay the piper because the terms are so favorable and Bitcoin will go back up by then, that's fucking hopium. Yes, indeed, Bitcoin is quote unquote going up forever. But guess what? It's not a straight freaking line. Life happens between there. So all of this to say, I'm not a cheerleader for all of these corporations that are coming along to Bitcoin to add Bitcoin to the treasury, right? But I also understand the game theory. So it's not that I'm shitting on it. It's just that I am trying to provide a realistic view. And why am I doing this? Because a lot of the cheerleaders are going to show you a bunch of really hyped up news. This is huge. This is moving the market, this and that. And what happens is that in our monkey brains, we start to have these expectations. And if we haven't built up our own conviction, then we get let down by those expectations. And there are a lot of people out there who may have, for them personally, they may have too much of their money piled into Bitcoin because they've been listening to all these hopium cheerleaders. And when these imaginary narratives don't play out in the imaginary timelines that have been provided, people end up wrecking themselves, right? They end up selling their Bitcoin at a price they did not want to. And they find themselves in some cases just totally regretting and feeling wrecked, right? But really, what were they wrecked by? They weren't wrecked by Bitcoin. They were wrecked by their expectations. And where did those expectations come from? They came from the hopium cheerleaders. So it's nice to have the good news. It's nice to see these companies doing this stuff. I just don't want people to place undue importance on news that doesn't really move the market. I mean, look, GameStop didn't even actually announce how much Bitcoin they were purchasing. If anything, we saw a poll from Michael Saylor as to how much Bitcoin they would need to purchase in order to gain the respect of Bitcoiners. I mean, this is, I genuinely feel like I'm just watching a Pied Piper, and I've said this before as well, just kind of leading all the rats off the cliff, or the lemmings, I should say, off the cliff. Okay, the last piece I wanted to say about this, and then I'll shut up, is this. Right now, I genuinely feel like the companies that we are seeing come to the market and start to purchase Bitcoin, for the most part, they are pets.com. Okay? For the most part, they are the WorldComs, the Enrons, okay? They are these companies that need gimmicks in order to survive. Now, that being said, good for them that they are attempting to survive in the best way that they know how. In all fairness, and of course, I mean, you'd kind of expect this because I'm biased towards Bitcoin, I would say, yeah, the best move they could do if they're going to buy anything is Bitcoin. This is a natural progression, right? So we're kind of seeing some of the weakest players, they're coming to Bitcoin and they're saying, hey, I need this to lift my corporation up. What I'm really curious about, and what I'm not necessarily excited for, but I want to see how it changes the landscape. What happens when the Microsofts come to the table? And yes, Microsoft is evil. Fuck them. Okay. But they've got tons of cash. And not only that, they have lots of free cash flow and they are positive in their operating earnings. So what happens when the Microsofts come to the table, the Adobes, the eBays, right? What happens when the Metas and the Googles show up, right? And they start trading their cash for digital pallets of Bitcoin, right? What happens then? That's what I'm really curious to see. Anyways, we are going to see it play out, okay? It's totally happening. Congratulations to the GameStop wars, for Ryan essentially bending the knee to Bitcoin. I definitely think it's probably one of the better decisions that he's made. The whole point of this clip was really just to provide a counter narrative to all of the hopium that is just being spun out of places like Bitcoin Magazine. Where they're really not looking at all of these businesses that are buying Bitcoin and looking at their financials and like realizing like, look, a lot of this stuff is, these companies are not in good shape, right? Like they're not in great shape. So unfortunately, I just don't, for me, it's not that I'm not excited about them. It's just that I am tempering my expectations. Because I understand that these businesses in particular were sinking ships of various degrees, but sinking ships. And this is kind of like maybe a last hurrah. Anyways, guys, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.